Have you ever noticed how some people act like historians of your worst moments, always eager to remind you of the chapters you've already outgrown? Why is it that no matter how much you've healed, there's always someone trying to drag you back into the shadows of who you used to be? Imagine breaking free from heavy chains, only for someone else to quietly gather the broken pieces and try to lock them back around your ankles. That's what it feels like when people refuse to let go of your past. No matter how far you've come, no matter how many storms you've weathered or battles you've conquered, some people only want to remind you of the version of yourself that struggled. They don't bring up your victories. They don't acknowledge the healing that took years to build. Instead, they circle back to the failures, the falls, the moments you weren't at your best. But why? It's like a scar that's finally faded until someone deliberately scratches it open again, just to see if it still bleeds. Or like those chains you once shattered, you threw them aside thinking they were gone for good. Yet out of nowhere, someone digs them up, piece by piece, and tries to wrap them around your ankles again. And here's the truth. Some people aren't interested in who you are now. They're invested in who you were. Why? Because your growth unsettles them. Your transformation forces them to confront something they've been avoiding in themselves. Your progress becomes a mirror, reflecting the places where they've stayed the same. While they drag your past into the present, you're left with a choice. Will you waste your energy defending the old version of yourself, or will you boldly walk forward in the new one? That's where the discomfort begins. For them, not for you. Because every step you take into your healing, into your strength, is a reminder of the step they haven't taken. So how do you deal with people who refuse to let go of your past? Stay with me, because by the end of this video you'll understand the truth behind their behavior, and, more importantly, you'll learn how to rise above it without losing your peace. Let's start with the first truth. They haven't healed themselves. People who constantly remind you of your past aren't doing it to help you stay grounded. They aren't being honest or keeping it real. What they're really doing is projecting. They point at your scars so they can avoid looking at their own. Think about it. If someone can't stop dragging up the mistakes you made years ago, even though you've grown beyond them, it's not about you. It's about them. They're clinging to the memory of who you were because they're stuck in their own unresolved pain. Your progress triggers them. Your healing reminds them of what they've ignored in themselves. Instead of confronting their pain, they project it outward. Instead of moving forward, they try to pull you backward. They anchor you to an identity you no longer live in, just so they don't have to face the discomfort of your evolution. This is exactly where Stoic wisdom speaks loudly. Seneca once said, "He who clings to pain cannot walk forward." Let that sink in. If someone keeps dragging your past into the present, it's because they are still shackled to pain they never resolved. It could be resentment. It could be jealousy. It could be guilt. Or maybe it's simply the fear of being left behind as you grow. But whatever the reason is, it doesn't belong to you. Their chains are not your chains. Their wounds are not your wounds. And their inability to heal should never hold back your transformation. We just talked about how some people drag up your past because they haven't healed themselves. Now let me take you deeper with a story that shows what this looks like in real life. Ila's story. I know a woman. Let's call her Ila. In her early 20s, she went through a rough and messy season of life. She made bad choices, fell into toxic relationships, and carried regrets she wasn't proud of. For a while, it seemed like her life was defined by chaos and mistakes. But Ila didn't stay there. She made a decision to change. She started therapy. She began rebuilding her sense of self, one step at a time. Slowly, she pieced her life back together, replacing shame with growth and finding peace in the person she was becoming. And yet, every time she ran into certain people from her past, especially one childhood friend, something familiar happened. Instead of acknowledging her transformation, they pulled her back into the past with casual little jabs. "Remember when you used to? Wow, never thought you'd actually get your life together." Always said with a smile, always disguised as a joke. But every word cut deep, reopening scars that had already healed. Eventually, Ila realized something important. That friend wasn't trying to reconnect. They weren't genuinely interested in her growth. What they wanted was to keep her anchored to a version of herself she no longer related to, not because they cared, but because her progress threatened the way they remembered her. Her growth didn't just challenge their image of her, it challenged their image of themselves. How to respond. So how do you deal with people who refuse to let go of your past? First, don't waste your energy arguing with them. You don't have to prove you've changed. Your life is the proof. Every decision you've made, every step forward, every new chapter, those speak louder than any words. Second, protect your peace. Just because someone has known you for a long time doesn't mean they deserve front-row access to your life today. History alone is not a reason to keep toxic connections alive. Third, walk boldly in your growth. You are not obligated to carry old baggage simply because someone else refuses to put it down. At the end of the day, your past is a chapter, not the whole book, and if someone insists on rereading the old pages over and over again, that only shows where they're stuck, not where you're headed. Keep growing, keep healing, and if they choose to stay behind, let them. You're not there anymore. Manipulation through the past. Now let's move to the second truth. Some people bring up your past for a much darker reason. Control. This isn't about nostalgia. It isn't about honesty. It's manipulation. They know you've moved forward, but that progress makes them uncomfortable. So what do? They weaponize your history. They reach for your lowest moments, those times when you were weakest or most broken, and they use them against you. Not to remind you with kindness, but to shrink you, to keep you feeling guilty, to tie you down with invisible chains of shame. It's not about love. It's not about friendship. It's about power. If they can control how you feel, they can control what you do. That's emotional leverage. You'll hear it in subtle phrases like, "Don't forget where you came from." After everything you've done, you think you're better than us now. On the surface, they sound like reminders, but in reality, they're chains. They're designed to keep you in a state of emotional debt, constantly trying to prove yourself, constantly working to earn their approval, constantly shrinking your light so they won't feel uncomfortable. But that isn't growth. That's submission. Stoic wisdom. And this is where Stoic wisdom shines like a guiding light. Epictetus once said, "Do not hand over your peace to the judgment of others." Think about that for a moment. The second you let someone else define your worth by your past, you surrender control of your present. And when you hand over that power, they will use it to shape your choices, your confidence, even your very identity. Your past may explain where you've been, but it should never dictate where you're going. In the last section, we talked about how people can use your past as a weapon of control. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. They only have as much power as you allow them to. Jason's story. Let me share another story. I know a man, we'll call him Jason. In his younger years, Jason made mistakes, wrong turns, poor decisions, choices he wished he could take back. But here's what mattered. He didn't stay stuck there. Jason did the hard work. He went to therapy. He rebuilt his confidence. He built a new career and created a healthier life. He found peace in becoming a better man than he used to be. And yet, one family member refused to let him move on. Every time Jason tried to step forward, this person would throw the past in his face. Be careful. We know what you're capable of. Just don't mess it up this time. At first it worked. Jason would shrink back. He doubted himself. He wondered if he was still chained to the mistakes of yesterday. He felt like no matter how far he'd come, he would always be trapped in the shadow of who he used to be. Until one day, he realized something powerful. If someone refuses to see your growth, that blindness is theirs, not yours. From that moment, Jason stopped defending himself. He stopped allowing guilt to steer his choices. And the second he reclaimed his peace, something incredible happened. Their words lost all of their power. How to respond. So how do you handle people like this? First, recognize the manipulation. Anyone who uses your past to shame you in the present isn't offering wisdom. They're trying to control you. Second, refuse to argue. Your transformation does not need their permission. It doesn't need to be proven. The way you live today is proof enough. And finally, protect your peace. You are not who you used to be. You are not here to be held hostage by someone who can't accept your growth, when they fear your growth. And this brings us to the third truth. One of the most uncomfortable reasons someone won't stop dragging up your past is this: they fear your growth. They see you changing. They see you becoming wiser, stronger, more confident, and that terrifies them. Because every step you take upward forces them to look in the mirror and see where they've stayed the same. Your progress unsettles them. Your healing becomes their reminder. And instead of facing their own stagnation, they try to drag you back into the version of yourself that feels safe for them. The old you, the flawed you, the broken you. Not because they care about where you've been, but because they can't handle where you're going. Here's the truth. Your growth threatens their comfort zone. If they can pull you back into the past, they don't have to face their own fear of being left behind. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The one who seeks your past fears your present power." That is exactly what's happening. They don't want to see your strength. They don't want to face your transformation. They don't want to feel the momentum of your rise. Because every step you take reminds them of how little they've moved, and rather than rise with you, they'd rather bring you down so things feel familiar. But here's the problem. They can't. Because you've outgrown the version of yourself they're still stuck on. No matter how many times they try to rewind the story, you're not going back. Earlier I shared Jason's and Eric's stories, men who discovered that people often fear your growth because it forces them to confront what they haven't faced in themselves. Eric's experience shows this so clearly. Eric's story. Eric made plenty of mistakes in his youth. He was reckless, careless, and even ended up in situations he wasn't proud of. But with time, he decided he wanted more for his life. He turned everything around. He went back to school, earned his degree, started his own business, and slowly built a life that he was genuinely proud of. On paper, his transformation was undeniable. Yet, every time he went back to visit his old friends, the conversations never seemed to change. "Remember when you got arrested? Man, I can't believe you got out of that mess." At first, Eric would just laugh it off. He tried to take it as harmless nostalgia. But the longer it went on, the more he realized something deeper was happening. They weren't joking. They weren't reminiscing. They were quietly anchoring him to a version of himself that no longer existed. Not because they couldn't see his growth, but because they feared it. His progress was a mirror reflecting their own lack of change. Every achievement, every new step forward reminded them of the things they had not done, the choices they had avoided, the growth they had postponed. And the only way they could feel better about their own stagnation was by making Eric small again. By pulling him back down into the shadows of who he used to be, they could avoid confronting the uncomfortable truth about themselves. How to respond. So, how do you handle situations like this? First, understand this. It's not your job to shrink yourself so someone else can feel tall. Their insecurity is not your responsibility. Second, stop trying to convince them that you've changed. You don't need to argue. You don't need to beg them to see your transformation. The way you live now already proves it louder than any words ever could. And finally, keep moving forward. Don't look back just because someone else is stuck there. The ones who fear your growth were never meant to grow with you in the first place. When they refuse to accept the new you. And that leads us to the next truth. One of the most frustrating things you'll face when you're evolving. Some people will simply refuse to accept the new you. You've put in the work, you've healed, you've changed mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You've built stronger boundaries, you've gained clarity. You've stepped into a version of yourself that is wiser, healthier, more intentional. But here's the painful part. Some people will keep treating you as if none of that happened. They'll talk to you the same way they used to. They'll make the same old jokes at your expense. They'll drag up the same mistakes, the same flaws, recycling stories of who you used to be, as if you're frozen in time. Why? Because your transformation disrupts their comfort. It forces them to reframe how they see you, and that requires effort. If they accept that you've grown, they'll have to change their perspective, and in many cases, they'll have to grow too. And let's be honest, many people aren't ready for that. It's easier for them to lock you into an old version of yourself than to deal with the new reality. Familiarity feels safer, even if it's outdated, even if it's a lie. Your new mindset, your clarity, your strength, and your boundaries, all of that disrupts the role you once played in their lives. And instead of adjusting to your growth, they choose to ignore it. Stoic wisdom. This is where Stoic wisdom speaks the loudest. Epictetus once said, "You are not bound to who you were. Grow with reason and let the past be dust." Let that settle for a moment. You do not owe anyone the past version of yourself simply because they are more comfortable with it. Your transformation is not a burden. It's not arrogance. It's not rebellion. It's the result of your strength, your intention, your courage to become who you were meant to be, not who others want you to remain. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, so be it. Their comfort is not worth the cost of your growth. In the last story, we saw how Emily faced friends who refused to accept the new her. Now, let me share another story that brings this lesson even closer to home. Emily's realization. Emily had spent years working on herself. She battled through anxiety. She walked away from a toxic relationship. She invested time and effort to heal and to step into a stronger, more powerful version of who she truly was. But when she reconnected with her old friends, it felt as though nothing had changed in their eyes. They still teased her for being too sensitive. They still laughed about how she used to cry over everything. At first, she brushed it off. But over time, she realized these little jabs weren't harmless. They were constant. Subtle, yes, but constant. They weren't seeing her as who she had become. They only saw the shadow of who she used to be. And the more she grew, the more uncomfortable it made them. Until finally, Emily understood the truth. They weren't rejecting her. They were rejecting their own discomfort with change, and that was never her responsibility to carry. How to handle it. So how do you deal with people who refuse to accept the new you? First, stop asking for permission to grow. You don't need their approval to become better. Second, don't shrink yourself to make others feel secure. Playing small doesn't protect you, it only holds you back. And finally, walk confidently in who you've become. The right people will rise with you. The rest will cling to your past simply because they can't handle your present. And remember, your present is a gift you fought hard for. Don't let anyone take it away. A message to the audience. If you've watched this far, I want you to take a moment. Drop a thank God in the comments. Hit that like button if this message resonates with you, because your support doesn't just help the channel, it keeps this conversation alive. Together, we're learning, growing and rising above the voices that try to hold us down. The fifth sign, they don't respect your journey. Now let's move on to the next truth. One of the clearest signs that someone doesn't truly value you is this: they don't respect your journey. No matter how much progress you've made, no matter how many battles you've fought and won, some people will still reduce you to the chapter you've already outgrown. They'll ignore the healing. They'll overlook the growth. They'll keep you stuck in a box labeled with who you used to be. But here's the truth. If someone refuses to acknowledge your evolution, it's because they don't respect your journey. Real respect means understanding that people can change, that healing is possible, that transformation is real. Respect means honoring the fact that we are not our past, we are the direction of our stride. When someone keeps bringing up your past, not with compassion but with judgment, it's not about honesty. It's about control. They're trying to box you into an old version of yourself, one that's easier for them to manage, dismiss, or define. Stoic wisdom. This is exactly where Stoic wisdom reminds us of what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Judge not the man by his past, but by the direction of his stride." Think about that. What matters most is not where you've been, but where you're going. Anyone who truly respects you will recognize that. They'll honor your path even if it looks different from what they expected. They'll embrace your evolution instead of resisting it. Sarah's story. Let me give you one more example. I know a woman, we'll call her Sarah. She had gone through dark seasons early in life. She made mistakes, she took wrong turns, she hit rock bottom, but she didn't stay there. Sarah did the inner work. She sought healing. She rebuilt her life from the inside out. Years later, she stood strong, grounded, wise, deeply self-aware. But every time she visited certain relatives, the comments always came, "You've changed so much. We remember when you used to be such a mess." They couldn't see her present without dragging up her past. In Sarah's story, we saw how relatives clung to an old version of her, refusing to accept the woman she had become. The same pattern repeats itself over and over again in different lives, and when people won't see your growth, you have to decide, will you keep fighting for their validation, or will you claim your freedom? How to handle people who refuse to see your growth. So how do you handle people like this? First, stop trying to convince them. If someone refuses to see your growth, that blindness is theirs, not your burden. You don't have to spend your life proving yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Second, set boundaries. If they don't respect your journey, they don't deserve a front row seat to it. Boundaries aren't walls meant to punish others. They are gates that protect your peace and your progress. And finally, walk proudly in your evolution. You don't need anyone's permission to continue becoming the person you were meant to be. You don't need applause or validation or constant recognition. At the end of the day, you've earned every step you've taken. Never let someone who's stuck in your past drag you back from your future. The sixth sign, they want to keep you stuck. Now let's talk about one of the most subtle, but also one of the most damaging tactics people use. They want to keep you stuck. These people don't bring up your past to heal it. They don't bring it up to understand it. They bring it up to trap you in it. Every time you try to move forward, they remind you of where you once fell. Every time you raise your voice with confidence, they echo back your old mistakes. And here's the truth. It isn't out of love. It's out of control. Bringing up your past becomes their way of anchoring you in guilt. And as long as you feel guilty, you stay quiet. You start to question yourself. You hesitate to shine too brightly or rise too high. You second-guess every step forward, wondering if you even deserve it. That's the game. They don't want you to rise. They want you to stay small. They want you to remain stuck where they feel comfortable. Stoic wisdom. This is exactly where Stoic wisdom cuts through the fog. Epictetus once said, "Guilt unearned is a chain forged by manipulation." Think about that. Not all guilt is real. Some guilt is carefully placed on you by people who benefit from your silence. If they can keep you ashamed of who you used to be, they can control who you're allowed to become. But here's the truth. Your past may explain you, but it does not define you. You are more than your worst chapter. Daniel's story. Let me give you an example. I know a man, we'll call him Daniel. Like many of us, Daniel made mistakes in his past. Choices he wasn't proud of. Situations he wished he could go back and change. But he took responsibility. He faced the consequences. And most importantly, he grew. He worked hard to become a better man, more disciplined, more intentional, more at peace. But there was one person in his life, his older brother, who never let him forget. Every time Daniel spoke with confidence, every time he pursued something new, his brother would cut him down with words like, "Funny how you think you've got it all figured out now, huh? Don't get too proud. We all remember the old you." And for a long time it worked. Daniel would shrink back. He'd pull away from opportunities. He felt undeserving of success. He let shame weigh him down, even though he had already moved far beyond the man he used to be. But then something shifted. One day Daniel realized the guilt wasn't his anymore. He had carried it long enough. If someone still needed to hold it over him, that said more about their need for control than about his need for redemption. How to respond. So, how do you respond when people use guilt as a weapon to keep you stuck? First, recognize the manipulation for what it is. Don't mistake control for care. Second, remind yourself of the truth. You've grown. You've changed. Your past is not a cage. And finally, keep moving forward. Because the moment you stop carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you, their words lose all of their power. In the last section, we talked about letting go of guilt that no longer belongs to you. Because real accountability leads to growth, not silence. And when you drop chains others forged for you, you rise higher than ever. The seventh sign. They're testing your emotional weak spots. Now let's move to another reason people keep bringing up your past. One of the most calculated and subtle of all. They test your emotional weak spots. These people aren't reminiscing. They aren't offering accountability. They're testing you. Here's the truth. Sometimes mentioning your past isn't about the past at all. It's about provoking a reaction in the present. It's a way of poking at your old wounds to see if you still flinch, to see if you still shrink, to see if you still carry shame or guilt from battles you've already fought and overcome. Think of it like this. Imagine a healed scar. Someone taps it, not out of care, but to see if it still hurts. That's what these people do with your past. They want to identify the places where you're still healing, so they can use those spots as leverage against you later. It might come across as a joke or a harmless side comment. But make no mistake, it's strategic. Because if they can make you react, if they can make you explain, defend, or doubt yourself, they know they've found your pressure point. And once they know where to press, they'll press it every time they feel threatened, jealous, or insecure. Stoic wisdom as armor. This is exactly where Stoic wisdom becomes your armor. Marcus Aurelius once said, "He who cannot be provoked holds the highest power." Let that settle in. True power isn't about shouting the loudest or proving the most. It isn't about meeting attack with attack. Real power is about restraint, calm stillness in the face of someone trying to rattle your peace. Because the less you react, the more control you keep. If they can no longer push your buttons, the game ends. They lose their leverage, and you remain free. Alex's story. Let me share an example. A man I know, we'll call him Alex, made huge strides in his life. In his younger years, he was impulsive, quick-tempered, and easy to bait. But he didn't stay there. He worked on himself. Therapy, reflection, mindset shifts. He committed to growth and built real self-control. But every now and then, someone from his past, especially one old friend, would drop a remark like, "Don't get too calm now. Remember when you used to flip out over everything?"